Can you guys talk about like anything, if it's a specific game that, to put it mildly, you're like, we really wanted to include this in your celebration, and Atari was maybe like, but why? Like, did you have to fight for any specific title on this celebration package?
I think that once kind of reached an understanding with Atari that what we wanted to do was going to be this this sort of interactive timeline concept, this journey through Atari history, and that the games that we were selecting were being selected for their historical importance and not necessarily for, do we still find this like fun today? I think everybody kind of got on board with the selections of the games for sure. I think there were things, there were things like, again, like, just to name an example from the poor beleaguered, Jaguar, as we're trying to come up with games, and looking at things that were available. I was like, oh, Club Drive. It's this very, very early free roaming 3D polygonal driving game. It's just from the very, very beginning of like having a game, purely kind of built out of polygons, having that in your home. It's really fascinating to play because of how early it is. And, there was just that initial pushback of feedback of like, well, it wasn't well reviewed. And it's like, doesn't matter. It's not the point in any way. And I think that, and there are Club Drive fans out there that are going to like this. And again, I think that like, it's so fascinating because we're not going to you and telling you, pay us $50 for the privilege of playing,
right.
Club Drive. It's there as, this exhibit, and it's put in that context, and we talk about what it is. And so I think that when it's in that context, when it's like, when those are the terms of the agreement, it's like, I think that people are gonna just have a different mindset going in. And you're going to mess around with Club Drive, and it's not going to be like, I can't believe they made me pay money for this. It's going to be more like, oh, this is a really interesting look at this era of video games. And then, you're going to crash the car and get it caught in some polygons, which is exactly what I did when I played it. And then you can jump back out and just go do something else, and it's fine. It's fine.
There are some very fascinating things in Club Drive I'd just like to add. And, just the other day I was playing it, and I noticed that there's a fireplace on one of the levels, and it is actually doing, like, if you've ever read articles on Doomfire, how they did the fire effect on the PSX Doom intro, it's doing something like that in real time on the GPU. And it's just got like this little like fire simulation going just on the fireplace in the world, which seeing something like that in the Jaguar era is just like, it still kind of makes me think, wow, that's pretty damn cool,
I know Digital Eclipse is all about authenticity, so you want the games to play as close as they can to the original product. But once you're done building these emulators and porting those games into them, does it ever do them too well to the point where you have to actually program a bug in manually because it fixed itself, or you did something to make it better and you're like, well, we have to go back. Now we have to find out how to make this slow down on the simulator because it's not slowing down in this area.
Yeah, in particular with the Jaguar, it has a very complicated CPU pipelining architecture. And so if you just kind of blindly emulate everything without paying attention to like pipeline stalls and stuff like that, a lot of games will probably run in the area of twice as fast as they should.
Yeah.
Which for some games feels great. For some games is totally unplayable. So, it does come back down to, having to try to be as authentic as possible on the timing, making sure that, the hardware is going to perform badly here, so we need to perform badly here too, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that comes up every so often. It's the actual idea of making this emulator worse, because oftentimes these old games, like, something is waiting for something else, and a specific amount of time has to occur. And if you speed that up, it messes up a lot of things. So to your point, you may be joking, Greg, but like really, in some cases, you do have to reduce some aspects of the emulator in order to get that accuracy that you're needing, right?
One of the things, sort of the opposite of this, is in Star Raiders, we have different modes, special sort of modes just for that game. Mike Micah put together a system that analyzes the frame rate, because the frame rate of the original game on the 5200 gets pretty bad at times, and it's it affects the feel of the game. We have that original mode in there, right? But he added something that analyzes the frames and sees, oh, it just dropped 4 frames, right? So, or X number of frames. And he actually increases the emulator's performance in those cases and creates a smooth 30 frames per second experience, which, for those people who have played this game on the 5200 and, loved it, this is going to be something of a dream come true, I think, because it just feels amazing. Again, this speaks to the sort of love and passion that we pour into these games, particularly with Star Raiders, because we all love that game so much.
Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. Guys were on the nitty gritty with this stuff, figuring out licenses, working with Atari, but did you happen to get any of the canceled VR prototype games in here? Is that in the History Museum? Do you talk about that VR headset? Because that's such an interesting story that I think not many people know about it. I think all the headsets were just had to be destroyed, I think, due to some legality issue.
We talk about we showed the Jaguar VR headset. My understanding is that Missile Command 3D, it actually did include support for that headset and would have functioned with that headset had the hardware itself been released. And that's in there, and you can essentially play the virtual mode and see what it would have been like.
It is on my personal to-do list, not for this product, mind you, but just to go in there and reverse engineer Missile Command and figure out, how it's expecting to interface with that VR headset. I actually did something very similar for Sega VR as well.
Yeah, that's very cool. That was a very cool project. Greg, if you ever get a chance outside of this, Rich's write-up on the whole VR headset, that VR headset is actually pretty interesting.
It's fascinating to see the technology in the 80s. You know what I mean? It's really good. Even you look at the Power Glove, which was a failed experiment. That was the Wii in the 80s. And you're just how did they have that hindsight, back then? And then they did it 30 years later. It's insane.
Yeah, so it just ends up being a cost thing, really.
Yeah. Sometimes being the first to market doesn't necessarily mean it's going to succeed.
Yeah, when you launch Missile Command 3D, you see the VR logo come in. That's the first thing you see, and it's kind of oh, VR.
Yeah, and it was
wow.
I don't want to get it was developed by the people who had created Virtuality, which was that early I don't know if you ever did this, but back in the 90s in the shopping mall in Connecticut that we went to, there was a place called Virtuality, and you could play the games there's early polygonal virtual reality games like Dactyl Nightmare and stuff like that, with this ridiculously heavy headset connected by a huge cable, and you'd get all tangled up in the cable as you're rotating it around. And everybody was it is part of, the Jaguar VR headset is just sort of part of that cultural moment that was happening between the Power Glove. And again, the Power Glove was designed by the people who had created the original, the $20,000 data glove that NASA ended up using. It's all the same people, and it's all the same groups essentially, all with this concept, this very new concept of virtual reality, trying to figure out some way of actually making it work. And all of that work, there's just this direct chain to what we have today. That's the early ground, the laying of the ground essentially for to whatever the Oculus Quest 2 or the Meta Quest 2 or whatever it is they're calling it today.
How does your studio go about? There's so much work. The team's so large, and everyone's contributing something different. How does your team get the price point so low on a celebration? This $40? It shouldn't just be a $60 or $70 collection. That's insane.
Well,
I was pushing for $200.
Yeah,
$250.
We're trying to
please.
if you just add up 2 Jaguar carts, that that's the price point. No, but it's a lot of factors. Most often it's the publishers kind of deciding what makes sense from a business perspective and things like that. And it's also a sort of a market kind of willingness of what they want to pay for this. And I think unfortunately, we get a lot of $20, $30 very basic releases that are going out that people are used to, and they sort of oh, this is just some games and some images. I don't want to spend a full retail price for this or something like that. And I think that sort of dilutes the market a little bit. And I feel that if everyone is, as Chris was sort of alluded to pretty earlier, if more and more companies kind of put in a little bit more of the effort and the time, the ocean raises up all the boats, right? And so it's the quality or the perceived quality across the board for sort of classic game compilations, the perception of that quality increases, and the amount that people are willing to pay because they know there's value to it increases as well. But we sort of kind of figured out that around that $40 price point in general is that kind of that sweet spot. And then it gives you some wiggle room as the price comes down. I think really the magical point for a lot of games, and especially where you see an explosion of retro or classic game collection releases, is around that $20-ish price point or so. That's where things like really blow up. And I think that's probably why even now, 4 years later, Street Fighter still sells like 100,000 units every 3 months, right? It's crazy. It's like 100,000 every 3 months, so like 4 years out. But there's just this, it's like value never goes down, right? Like when you pack something with the value, it becomes evergreen to a degree, and it becomes timeless to a degree. So I think we just keep striving. I think we try to keep pushing the quality of these releases higher and higher, and hopefully that perception equates to market value at some point. Kind of go from there, right? So.
And then you have over 100 games in this collection. There's a lot of stuff. Like there were a lot more than that released across these platforms and arcades, and I'm sure you're gonna, somebody has out there, but you didn't put this obscure title in, you didn't put this one in, and I'm gonna be that guy now. Do you happen to get Starfighter in there at all, just out of curiosity?
No, we don't have Starfighter there.
Okay.
I'm trying to go through the games in my.
That's one of those really obscure like arcade.
I'm trying to go through my head
games.
of like, it's a lot of games. I'm trying to like, okay, what games?
No, it is. Yeah, I mean, it was. They
Are you talking about the last Starfighter?
Yeah, they made the movie,
prototype?
and then after they made the game that never really fully
I
released,
see. Right,
or
right,
like
right.
it tanks, and so they didn't produce a lot of the cabinets, and it's really rare to find.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking in general, I mean, it's just very difficult to do stuff that has that license attached to it. Like from a historical perspective, I mean, we would have wanted to include E.T., right? Like this sort of very pivotal game in the history of Atari. We reference it, we talk about it, you know, and I think that's something important that we really tried to do as well. Like we don't just want to pretend it didn't exist. So it's a sort of a dance with Atari and the lawyers and everything like that. Like, what can we say? What can we do? How can we, you know, kind of put it into the history, even though, you know, the game itself is not something that can be experienced.
Yeah, you're right, because sometimes it's a case of people like, yeah, of course you can use it. Or Atari already owns the rights, and in some cases it's like, yeah, you can use it. Just give us $1 million plus 30% of the back end. You're like, well, that's not gonna work for us. So we'll skip it.
Yeah, movie companies especially, or people who own movie rights and stuff, are always problematic in that part. And I remember, not specifically in this collection, but there was a lot of tightness about the use of the Starfighter IP because there was the rumors of another movie, and you know, once rumors of a movie happen or a sequel or a follow-up, everything just gets bolted down. You know what I mean? So,
what platforms will be on them? Where can people go to find more information about it and pre-order it?
It's basically on every platform. So we have it releasing out on Steam, we have it out on Switch, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series platforms. So everything that you can imagine that it's out, it's going to be out on. It's also coming out on the VCS. So for those who actually own the Atari VCS hardware, we will be releasing a version of it for that platform as well, for the very diehard Atari fans. And you know, you can find out about it. You can go to the Atari's website or Digital Eclipse's website to find out more about this release, and go out and, you know, pre-order it at all the various retailers that you are aware of, GameStop, the Best Buys, the Targets, and all this stuff. It's everywhere. And also, it might be hard to get now. I think only a few retailers have it, but there is a special Steelbook edition of the Switch version of the release for $49.95, I think it is. So about $10 more than the regular version, and it comes with a Steelbook and a poster. So for if you're a really diehard fan and want a Steelbook, you better hurry up and grab that as well.
Perfect. And then I have one really obscure question, Tavi, that I saved it to the very end, so I made sure to give Atari all of its due process. And I'm sure no one's gonna be able to say anything about it, but can anybody here give me anything on the status of MVC2 and like what's going on with that property? You guys are the last people to touch it. You know, everyone's looking at you for the hope, you know, like you're Luke Skywalker here to save us from the Empire. Like, any updates on that front at all?
Unfortunately, we really cannot comment on that. So I can't give you a comment either way. All I can say, sadly, is we can't comment on that.
Damn it. Oh, you know, I'll take that bet. It's better than a no. So I'll take it.